First, a rumble of thunder struck, just as Woodrow was still in the comic book. He froze, looked around, then slipped the comic from the middle of the pile. That jerk'll never miss it, Woodrow muttered. It served Wayne right for bringing the comics to show and tell and bragging about how many he had. Woodrow's mother didn't approve of comics, so he didn't have any of his own. But these were too awesome to resist. Woodrow stuck the comic in his desk and joined the rest of the class outside for recess. When they got back, he watched Wayne carefully. Sure enough, the fool never checked through the stack. Perfect, Woodrow thought. At the end of the day, he waited until everyone else had left, then slipped the comic under his shirt and headed out. The rumbles grew closer. A raindrop hit Woodrow's nose. He looked up at the sky just as the clouds let loose. A heavy rain fell and wind slapped at his face. He hunched over and ran for the nearest shelter. An old porch on an old house to his left. The rain seemed to grow even harder. Woodrow shivered and watched the water rushing into the gutter across the street. He jumped as the door behind him opened. He spun and found himself facing a plump old lady with frizzy white hair and red cheeks. She looked like someone who baked a lot of cookies. "Do you want to come in?" she asked. No. Nearly every day, in school and at home, Woodrow was warned about strangers. Besides, his favorite show was starting in 10 minutes. "I have to go." "Well," the woman said, "you ain't dressed for this kind of weather. You'll get soaked to the bone." Woodrow glanced at the lawn, where the grass was already turning into a land of miniature lakes. The woman was right. The rain would soak right through his shirt. He didn't care if he got wet, but the comic would be ruined. He dropped the magazine in the bathtub once. The pages had gotten all warped and rippled, and they stayed that way even after they dried out. But I really need to get home," he said. The woman looked over her shoulder and then back at Woodrow. "You wait right here, young man." She scurried off. There was a clatter and a bit of banging, then she returned with a smile and an umbrella. "You can borrow my ratty old Bummbershoot," she said. "I'm not planning on going out in this downpour." "Bummbershoot?" Woodrow asked. The woman laughed. "Silly me. I guess it's an old-fashioned word, but I'm an old-fashioned lady." She thrust out the umbrella. "Here, take good care of it." "I will." Woodrow pushed the umbrella open and held it over his head with one hand. The fabric smelled like old people. The handle was white like ivory. The shaft was some sort of polished dark brown material. He pressed his other hand against his chest, keeping the comic in place. The umbrella was large enough to cover him like a canopy. The tips of the ribs dropped past his shoulders. Leaning against the wind, Woodrow stepped off the porch. The splat of water against the umbrella drowned out the woman's next words. "You be sure to come back." "I will, I promise." Woodrow didn't want to keep her stupid umbrella, which didn't mean he'd go to the trouble of bringing it back. He planned to chuck it in the trash once he got out of the rain. The wind whipped up, jerking the umbrella in his hands. One of the end tips scratched his cheek. Woodrow swore and grabbed the handle with both hands, keeping his arms pressed against the comic so it wouldn't fall out from under his shirt. The winds gusted again. The umbrella twisted and flapped like it was trying to fly back home. "You can borrow my Bummbershoot," Woodrow said, mocking the woman's voice. "Yeah, sure. I'll bring it back. Stupid old lady." Another gust nearly tore the umbrella from his hands. He pulled it closer, tilting it so he could see well enough to know where he was going. For a moment, the umbrella was strangely still. Then it flapped and jerked again. As the snap of fabric filled his ears, Woodrow realized something was missing. No rain. The sound of the raindrops had stopped. The puddles around him were unrippled. The umbrella jerked and flapped. Woodrow didn't hear leaves rustling. He didn't feel his pants legs flapping. No wind. The storm was over. In the instant that it took Woodrow to wonder how an umbrella could flap when the air was dead calm, he lost his chance to fling it away. By the time he tried, it was too late. The umbrella clamped down on him with a wet snap. As the stiff fabric encased him, Woodrow struggled to free his arms. A dozen sharp jabs ringed into his body as something bit into his flesh. Woodrow let out a muffled scream. He kicked. He fell to the ground and rolled. It didn't matter. Nothing could make the Bummbershoot let go of him. Not until it was finished. When the wind picked up again, blowing back toward the house, the ratty old Bummbershoot let go of what little remained and tumbled back home, leaving behind nothing but a damp pile of clothes, a soaked pair of muddy shoes, and a wet, ruined comic book. As it bumped back against the porch steps, a small, moist sound came from among the flaps. It might have been a bird.